and a storyteller, and the owner of First Story Strategies, which he founded 4 years ago. His previous jobs include a radio reporter in his home state of Tennessee, press secretary and a chief of staff to the member of Congress, and vice president at a public affairs company in DC. Randy used to say he is an avid reader of books. He now admits he is an avid buyer of books and an even more avid TV viewer. Something nobody knows about Randy is he worked briefly at the Distilled Spirits Council, which is the liquor lobby in DC, where he helped launch the American Whiskey Trail, a history and hospitality tourism journey through Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Without further ado, I will let Randy take, uh, go ahead and present. Thanks,
All right.
Randy.
Thank you, Dawn. I will try to pick up some time here. So one of my aunts in Tennessee, who is not known for being subtle, said to me a couple years ago, "So what do you do in Chicago?" And I said, "Well, I'm a writer and a storyteller." And she just stared at me and she said, "You're a Democrat, ain't you?" And I just kind of stared back at her because I knew the answer to the question, but I was so confused by what prompted it. And she said, "Never mind, doesn't matter. What does that mean you do?" And I said, "Well, if people have a hard time writing about themselves or they don't know how to talk about themselves." And she said, "You know what? I don't care. I don't care." And that was the end of the conversation. One of the things I love about BNI is that you care, and that people, that especially when we have the opportunity to do one-to-ones, that we get the chance to really dig into what each of us does. And when I do one-to-ones, I very often, and it's very fair, get the question Rachel asked me one time, "I think I know what you do, but I think I need a refresher because I'm not sure exactly who to refer to you." And that's thankfully because BNI has helped me carve out a niche of doing the things that I want to do. So what I want to do today is take you back in time. So my services are communication strategy, writing and editing, video production, legacy storytelling, workshops and training. That also could mean all kinds of things. So I want to take you back in time to where I picked up some of the skills that I use for the various things I do today. And we're going to go back to the late 90s when I was in college. I was a radio TV major, and I was a TV reporter during school. I had a little bit of hair and I had some bad clothes. Can I get a nod if you all could actually hear that audio? Yeah, okay, cool. So my first full-time job when I got out of school was actually working in radio where I was covering politics.
This is the Tennessee Radio Network Capital Report. I'm Randall Ford. Election night's well into day 3 now. We're still waiting on final numbers to see which candidate gets Florida's 25 electoral votes and heads to the White House in January. Relative to some of those still missing from the World Trade Center tragedy, applying for death benefits today. Harriet Daly Cruz wanted to have her sister legally declared dead. She also says she comes from a family of military members.
They may be deployed, so this is not really open for my family.
That is kind of the way that we were able to, in that story, tie this policy that was going on, this horrific event that the world was going through, to a specific family, has always kind of been the hallmark of what I do, connecting policy to people. And that is what I did during this time as a reporter. So then because I was covering politics, I went to DC and I started working with this guy, John Tanner, who was a congressman from Tennessee. And I was with him for 10 years as his press secretary and then his chief of staff. And so I kind of traded in that reporter hat to become a politics guy. I learned PR. I became a coach because I was giving recommendations to this person who was twice my age. And I didn't realize all of these skills were being developed at the time, but they were, and it was really something that has helped me very much moving forward. When he retired, I went to a company called LRG, which does public affairs, all kinds of stuff in DC, and was working with federal agencies on their communications. We were also managing several trade associations. So I was dealing with everything from tuberculosis to military to HIV care, all kinds of topics. And that's when I started to wear a producer hat. I was still pulling on my policy and politics advocacy hat. I was still doing PR, and I was still doing some press stuff. I eventually started First Story Strategies because I thought I wanted to start wearing all of those hats and doing the things that I liked to do. So I just want to talk about some of the projects that I've been doing during COVID. One of my longtime clients, the Association of Defense Communities, had to kind of jump into action when they realized that the threat that COVID-19 had on military communities. People have soldiers, sailors, airmen, and others who are living in their communities. So it was not only a local public health issue, it was a national security issue. And so I came on board and helped write a daily newsletter where we were talking about what was happening in these communities. We also did video dispatches from what was happening on the ground, including this one about Month of the Military Child. Mike, by the way, was the editor on those videos, so it's always fun to work with him. This was, again, wearing my producer hat, my press hat, because I was writing, and there was the policy stuff involved, so I was still a little bit involved in the politics world. I have met through BNI, this is another Canadian member, and he gave me the permission to talk about this. He wants to, Matthew Birch wants his business to be the company that people in Canada come to help navigate the COVID financial response there, which is different than what we have here. So I do his ghostwriting. He sends me thoughts on what he wants to write about, or we talk about it on the phone, and then we shape this into articles that he blasts out. So this gives me a chance, again, to be a reporter, work on his messaging as PR, and there's still that policy connection that we're trying to make, which I love doing. Training. So as some of you know, Mayor Swallow, Mariana Swallow, the public speaking coach, we work together. Any of her public speaking clients who may need work helping tell their stories, or to fine tune, especially if they're involved in politics, they sometimes need me to come in and help with that. We just recently did workshops for the National Conference of State Legislatures, which means legislative staff at all 50 state legislatures, and we taught them about communications and storytelling and how to use that for everything from email to public speaking to talking to their bosses. So this was, you know, again, a place where I got to wear several of my different hats. Aunt Martha's is a client that Brad actually introduced us to last year, and Brad and Mike and I did some work there, and then we did, Mike and I did another project there this year. They do wraparound services for young people who fall out of the foster care system. And COVID-19, as you can imagine, they had all of these wards of state, all of these kids who were in their care, and they had to keep them safe in ways even more than what they usually do. And so Aunt Martha's wanted to do a video to showcase what all their staff had done. And so Mike and I went out and did that. I want to show you just the last 30 seconds of this.
We're heroes.
So this pulled on my background again as a producer, press because we were asking the questions, PR because we knew what messaging they wanted to get out, and there were still the policy and political things to think about. So for me, when I think about how to use all of those things and how you can continue helping me do that, these are some great referrals for me. Anybody who is a communicator or works at a .org, so if that's a nonprofit, a trade association, some other kind of organization, if they need extra capacity with their communications work, I will say I'm kind of stretched thin on pro bono work right now, but those organizations that can't afford a full communications person, I am a great way to kind of add to their team at a much more cost-efficient rate. People who want to blog and don't know where to start or don't have the time to do it or don't feel like they're good writers, just like we were talking about with Birch Accounting and Tax Services, I would love to talk to them. Anybody who's curious about video, whether it's a project that I can help with or I can just connect them with other people, you know, we have Mike and Brad who are also good resources on that. Training coordinators, so people who are putting together professional development, anybody who is looking for speakers, I would love to talk to them and see if there's a way that I can do workshops. And people who work with seniors and families. We didn't get into this much, but I do enjoy working with people to get their family stories on track. So that I hope answers a few questions for people about exactly what First Story Strategies is and what it means when I say that I'm a storytelling strategist. So thank you all very much for indulging me.